Welcome to today's episode of Culture Beyond COVID, which is also our last one. That's why I'm more than happy to welcome today's guest because she will not only speak about European cultural affairs, instead, she also looks beyond, both outside the EU but also taking the local level into account. So, I heartily welcome Dr. Elke Kaschl Mohni from the Goethe Institut in Brussels and invite you to listen to her ideas about the cultural ecosystem of tomorrow.
My name is Dr. Elke Kaschl Mohni. I'm Regional Director for Southwest Europe for the Goethe Institute based here in Brussels. Before Brussels, I was working, among other things, as Regional Director for North Africa, Middle East, based in Cairo. I was Director in Addis Ababa and in Abu Dhabi. And I have a background in Middle Eastern studies. And for me, this experience outside of Europe is very important to bring to the table here in Brussels for anything we do. The Goethe Institute is the German cultural institute working worldwide for cultural exchange. We have 157 institutes in almost 100 countries, and 52 of these institutes are in Europe. For us, what is important concerning our work in the cultural and creative sector here in Europe? I think I would like to start off with two general remarks. The Goethe Institute is not a private enterprise. We are a non-profit cultural institute and we work with a value-based approach. For us, this is essential because for everything we do in the cultural and creative field, it's not the economic side that is in the sole focus, but we always also look at aesthetics and social aspects. That's one thing. And the other thing I would like to mention is that with our worldwide network of institutes around the globe that are very much rooted in the local scenes, I think we definitely have an asset, something that's extremely valuable to bring to the discussion to the cultural and creative field here in Europe, because in this way we enable cross-border multilateral connections, corporations that are prone to trigger innovation and creativity through promoting or through prompting new insights and new perspectives. So these are two general remarks that I wanted to bring to the table for anything that we do in the cultural and creative field. And maybe a few short remarks also on specific objectives that we are pursuing in our current work. I think on the one hand, internationalization and network building is an area that for us is very important for our work in the cultural and creative sector in Europe. It's about connecting between German, European, and international actors. It's about connecting across the sectors. The Goethe Institute is not working for one specific sector only, but our understanding of culture is very broad. So we're looking across the sectors, and I think we are very well positioned to act as a platform, as a mediator in order to kind of mediate a dialogue across the sectors, and not only across the sectors, but also across the stakeholders, kind of having a multi-stakeholder approach, taking into account that many stakeholders are involved when you look at cultural creative work, from the actors themselves to educational institutions, to ministries, other public institutions, and to the private sector. And for us, it's important to kind of have a broad view on who should be involved. A second thing that is very important to our work is the diversification of narratives through prompting, reflection, debate, critical thinking. I think for us as a cultural institute, this is essential also as a trigger for innovation and creativity. And maybe one example, we had a wonderful festival end of October called Freiraum Festival, which was multidisciplinary, it was hybrid. We had online and physical events in over 20 cities all over Europe. And we brought together intellectuals, thinkers, cultural and creative actors, professionals to think about what is the state of freedom today in Europe. Just as an example of how through such a debate and such a reflection, hopefully new things come up, new ideas that spark and inspire to look at things in a different way and bring things forward. We are also, thirdly, very much engaged in capacity building and mutual learning. Here we mostly address early career or mid-career professionals. We are always through our programs looking at artistic, aesthetic, cultural, and business competencies. So we find that very often things get looked at separately. For us, it's important to have the combination between the business side and the aesthetic and cultural side. And finally, I think it's for us something that's essential is always to take local competencies and local contexts into account when we shape our programs. And finally, we seek to encourage ecosystems, so looking at creatives and their networks in a context. And also to illustrate what we do, I would like to refer to our program Creative Flip, that is co-funded by the EU and a consortium led by the Goethe Institut, addressing issues such as access to finance, legal issues, peer-to-peer learning, capacity building, and again, cross-sectoral exchange as crucial issues that you need to look at when you think about nurturing ecosystems. Maybe so far about what we do. I mean, it's common knowledge that the culture and creative sector, it's a very vibrant sector. It's pivotal to European economy. It's extremely important when you think about your European future that is innovative, sustainable, competitive, socially cohesive, etc. We also see a sector that is dealing with a lot of challenges, high fragmentation, high level of self-employment, sometimes difficult access to funding and finance, micro entrepreneurship, fragile institutions. So with the pandemic, all of these challenges became exacerbated, and I think, as is widely discussed and as is common knowledge, it is the cultural and creative sector that is basically among the most hardest hit, the worst hit with the pandemic. So also we feel it as a Goethe Institute. We are very thankful to the German government that they actually helped us deal with the situation. We feel it extremely with our partners, where we see that we always work with partners. It's always about co-creation. And we see that even for big partner institutions, the situation is extremely hard. I think it is a reality that this pandemic will leave many not being able to survive, many that are struggling. And so for us, it's extremely important that what we do really corresponds to these challenges and corresponds to the needs that we see in the culture and creative sector at the moment here in Europe. And again, just a few examples of how we respond. One measure, which I think is extremely well put, is a relief fund that the Goethe Institute is implementing with the support of the German Federal Foreign Ministry and various other partners to give structural support to organizations in the cultural and educational field outside of Europe. So it's not about project funding, but it's really about structural support, about support that is fast, that is kind of unbureaucratic, and that helps organizations that do not have access to funding kind of survive this very hard period. So this is one example. Second example I want to bring to the floor is the platform Creatives Unite. Creatives Unite is a platform implemented under the project Creative Flip by the EU and a consortium led by the Goethe Institut. Early on, at the start of the pandemic in spring 2020, Creatives Unite was set up as a platform that should bundle relevant information and initiatives for the sector in order to bring all this information to one place to be available. And the third project I want to mention is the project iPortunus. iPortunus is a pilot project implemented by under the project Creative Europe and the consortium led by the Goethe Institut. It's a mobility scheme for artists and creative and cultural actors. Of course, in times of pandemic, with the travel restrictions that everybody is facing, it's difficult to think about mobility. And at the same time, of course, people need to work, and sometimes this work does require travel. So a lot of thought from our side went into thinking of how to implement this very much needed mobility scheme in a way that would be pandemic compatible. It means that we are showing utmost flexibility in implementation, meaning flexibility in terms of time frame, flexibility in terms of destination, and flexibility in terms of format. So we are speaking not only about physical mobility, but about hybrid mobility or even digital mobility. And I think the success criteria for the project, why this is such an important project in these times, is that it's very individual, it's small scale, and again, very much adapted to the needs of the sector. A vision for the future of the culture and creative sector in Europe needs to address the challenges that the sector is facing per se. So we are speaking about high fragmentation, small structures, fragile institutions. A vision for the culture and creative sector in Europe also needs to think about how we respond to the pandemic, the short-term and long-term response, and how we manage to take the specific needs of the sector that arise from the pandemic into account. To me, this means, first, go small and go local. We need to ensure that we have flourishing local ecosystems by giving support to small, young, fragile institutions, organizations, actors, and even individuals. Second, go European. Our pandemic response should not be left to national action with its national priorities and capacities. We need to make sure that the sector can flourish and recover in all European countries by ensuring that we have translocal cooperation, translocal learning, translocal exchange, because it's exactly through such translocal cooperation, learning, and exchange that the innovative and creative potential of local ecosystems, strong local ecosystems, can interact and really unfold their innovative and creative potential all over Europe. And the third aspect is go international. With the pandemic, we have seen a lot of turning inward and focus on Europe. Yet, Europe is always part of the world. The culture and creative sector in Europe is always interlinked with the international scene. We are talking about global markets, global audiences, global networks. So it's vital that we keep this international dimension in mind. I'm very glad to see that with the new Creative Europe program that there is a certain international dimension, and I strongly urge to always maintain this dimension by whatever we do, because again, if you want to see a flourishing European cultural and creative sector, we need to take the international dimension into account. And so, to conclude, my vision for the culture and creative sector in Europe would be looking at lots of strong, flourishing, vibrant, expanding local ecosystems, looking at lots of strong, vibrant, expanding European and international translocal connections in order to have lots of solidarity, lots of shared Europeanness in order to be able to address in a creative and innovative way to address the many challenges that we are facing today in the world.
Thank you, Elke Kaschl Mohni, for drawing attention to the local and transnational dimensions of cultural cooperation and for highlighting that the high fragmentation of the cultural and creative sector can be overcome by fostering the translocal ecosystems in the future.